Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're getting this. My name is Brad Woods. I'm a storyteller here in Guelph, and I just want to say what an honor it is to be doing this with you folks today. I'm always so thrilled when I get asked to do anything with the Guelph Guild of Storytellers. Thank you so much for having me here today. I've been asked to tell a story for Canada Day. Now, this isn't really about Canada per se. But it's a good Canadiana sort of story, and I think it's a good one for the times that we find ourselves living in. The first time that I was ever in Winnipeg was in the back of an ambulance in the pouring rain, and that is the best beginning to a story I'll probably ever have. I was at a camp up there, telling stories and whatnot, and on a day off we went into town to do some banking and pay some bills and that sort of thing. And on the way back out of town, we bought a bag of apples from a local merchant. So we've left town, we're driving along the Trans-Canada Highway, munching away on these apples, when my then 11-month-old son started to choke. Now, this wasn't regular little guy choking. This was like excessive drool and face going purple and eyes rolling back of his head kind of thing. And so I turned the car around and drove frantically through the town looking for the hospital. The drive only took about 3 minutes, but it felt like it took the rest of my life. At that point, it wasn't even raining yet. So I burst through the doors of the Kenora Hospital with my little guy in my arms. I was as nervous and as worried as the day he was born. And they got us into a room and did a bunch of tests and a bunch of x-rays and determined that there was indeed a piece of apple stuck somewhere down in one of the wrong pipes that was preventing him from breathing properly. So now I find myself pacing around the lobby of the Kenora Hospital, drinking vending machine coffee, waiting for a medical team to determine whether or not they're going to operate on his little 11-month-old throat or send him off to the sick kids hospital in Winnipeg where they can deal with these kind of things more appropriately. Next thing I know, I'm climbing into the back of an ambulance with a doctor and a nurse and my 11-month-old son strapped to this hospital bed. He was kicking and screaming and flailing and wailing. It was bad enough that he was choking, but now he felt like he was being tortured. And at this point, it was beginning to rain. Now, as soon as the ambulance started driving, he fell asleep. I don't know if it was the hum of the engine or just the movement of the vehicle. I don't know what it was. But on the one hand, it was nice because it calmed everything down. But on the other hand, it only heightened my anxiety. Because at least when he was screaming, I knew that he was breathing. And so we're driving along the highway there, and they've got the sirens going, and they've got the lights going, and they're going about 120 kilometers an hour, and I'm nervous, and I'm worried, and I'm praying, and my hands are all wet, and my mouth was all dry, and it would have taken an act of God to get me to let go of his fat little hand. Then all of a sudden, the doctor said, "So what brings you to Kenora?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing some work at one of the camps." He said, "Oh, what kind of work do you do?" And I said, "I'm a storyteller." And they said, "Great!" Now, I think what they meant by great was that I could entertain them, tell them stories. But clearly I wasn't in the mood to be entertaining anyone. As a matter of fact, I think great was probably the last thing that got said on that trip. I just spent the next 2 hours staring at my son, listening to the pouring rain. Now, when they finally got us to the sick kids hospital there in Winnipeg, they sort of fast-tracked us up to the front of the line, probably because he was an infant and they had radioed ahead and all that sort of thing. So they got us into another room and there was more tests and there was more x-rays and there was a lot more waiting. And then all of a sudden I find myself in this hospital room. The scenario is such that I find myself in a hospital room in the middle of the night, and I'm 300 kilometers from where I'm supposed to be, and 3,000 kilometers from where I want to be. And I'm done. It's 12 hours after this whole torturous ordeal has begun, and I'm done. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, I feel completely wasted. Just, absolutely spent. So I'm laying there, and all of a sudden, my son opened one eye, and then the other. And he looked at me, and he smiled. Now, you need to understand something about my son, Porter. He's one of these kids with a fat, round, white head. And when he smiled, things change. When he smiles, it's like that first stroke of color on a blank canvas, or like stirring cream into black coffee. And he's staring at me, smiling. And all I can think of saying is, "Are you crazy? Do you know where you are? Do you know what you've been through? Do you know what you put me through?" But he just keeps staring and smiling, like he's trying to tell me something. But he's only 11 months old, so he's got no words. And all I've ever done is listen with my ear, so I don't know how to hear exactly what he's trying to say. And it's frustrating to both of us because he wants me to know something. He's trying to tell me something, and I'm trying to listen, but I can't. And it's getting more and more annoying and more frustrating. And then all of a sudden, it hits me. He's smiling because he's okay. He's smiling because somewhere along the line, he either swallowed down or spat up that little piece of apple. And so now he's saying, the show must go on. That we got to get back on the horse and ride. Or perhaps that we need to stop and smell the roses. Or whatever it is they grow there in Winnipeg. He was telling me, as clearly as anybody has ever told me anything, that unless you're hurting, you have to be the one that's helping. Even if that's just by smiling. And so that's what we did for the rest of the night in that hospital room. Just stared at each other and smiled. It's hard to know how to listen. And it's really humbling when you learn it from an 11-month-old boy. Thanks for listening.